12. And a one-armed pilot talks about flying and the one-armed pilot whose arm came off at the crucial moment. Also today, salty caramels, pistachio macaroons and, would you believe, tipsy elephant. Some of the local fine foods which swept the boards in the 2014 Taste Awards. They'll be here and we'll be eating them. Let's talk back today. But before that, I've got a man on the phone that I know you're going to want to hear from. Do you remember that story this morning about the pilot flying the plane into Belfast? It emerged that he lost control of it temporarily when his prosthetic arm came off. Now, he still managed to land without any damage or anyone being hurt. But if you knew that the pilot flying the plane you were on had an artificial arm, would it make any difference to you, or should it, or is that possibly offensive? I don't know. Stephen Robinson from Leeds lost an arm in a motorbike accident, later obtained a pilot's licence. He now flies light aircraft and he's on the line. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
So, this is all quite interesting, isn't it? Have you ever had a similar experience where maybe you're landing and because of some kind of movement that you got to make in the cockpit, you and your arm lose contract?
It's almost like you've heard my story before, because exactly that's what's happened. When I was first started with flying lessons, I was flying an aircraft called a PA-28, which is a little four-seater aircraft known as a Piper Warrior as well. And we were doing simulated landings at 3,500 feet on the cloud, because it's always safer to pretend you're landing on a cloud, and if things go wrong, you just fall through and you pick up and recover. So we were doing simulated landings. Really, we were testing out the new prosthetic arm that the NHS had made for me. We weren't certain whether it would work okay. And when I say we, I mean me and my flying instructor. And we were doing the simulated landings, and we came in to do the flare, like what has happened with this commercial pilot. And as I pulled back to do the flare with my prosthetic arm while controlling the throttle with my left arm, the prosthetic arm just came off. But it was certain, it was obvious at that point that the prosthetic arm I had wasn't up to the job. So I had to go back to the drawing board and get another prosthetic arm made, but that wasn't up to the job either. So I ended up making my own prosthetic arm. I'm a little bit of an engineer and inventor as well. So I made my own prosthetic arm that did work, but during the process of doing that, I'm at a really nice flying school over in a place called Sherburn in Yorkshire. And a chap at a school called AFT said to me, "You're flying the wrong aircraft, you should be flying a stick aircraft." So now I fly a stick aircraft, which doesn't require me to use a prosthetic arm.
I suppose if you're flying a commercial airliner, though, you don't tend to have that kind of choice, do you? You're not going to get... It's not like driving a Formula One car. It's not going to be tailored to your specific needs. So you're going to have to just use what's there. Would you be worried if you knew that your pilot had a prosthetic arm and, you know, whenever he pulled the lever back to flare, as you say, that it might come off?
No, I wouldn't be at all worried. But then maybe I'm biased as well, because a lot of people will be biased because he hasn't got two arms. Now, maybe I'm biased because he has one arm and I have one arm and I have an affinity with him. But I know the type of pressure that he's been under from experience to just prove himself as a competitor in the employment field. Because as a disabled person, you have to be 10 times better than the able-bodied person just to get the same job. And the stringent testing that they put you through during flight testing, this chap's had to prove himself a dozen times over.
Flybe have come out very strongly in support of him and say that they have a policy for employing people who do have problems, if I could put it like that. And BALPA, the Pilots Association, say there's no blanket ban on pilots with prosthetic limbs. You think that the current tests and so on are up to scratch, Steve?
I do. You know, what would be interesting, of course, would be to see the type of testing they do on these people on TV or on some programme, just to put the public's mind at rest, to see the amount of stringent testing that they have to go through. The pilot did exactly the right thing. And it could have happened to a person with two arms either. So if your hand slipped off the controls momentarily while doing a flare, then you would have to put your hand back on and gain control immediately. Well, that's what the pilot did. He just didn't drop the throttle off because it was safer to land under power than not. Because sometimes we do land under power, sometimes it's required, and other times we land on a glide approach where we just come into a glide and we've cut the power off just before we touch down and we flare. So basically, it just done in a slightly different order because he had to do, because the circumstances forced him to do so.
Stephen, it's been really good talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Stephen Robinson there from Leeds, who flies with one arm and a prosthetic arm as well. So he has an experience that otherwise we wouldn't have heard about, hasn't he? And you can tell me what you think about all of that. 81771 or on Twitter @WendyTalksBack.